People Just Do Nothing is a British mockumentary TV series that aired for the first time in 2014. In short, it focuses on an eclectic group of friends who run pirate radio station Corrupt FM in Brentford, West London, broadcasting primarily UK garage and drum and bass music to a small audience at best. The show had 5 series between 2014 and 2018, and there is also an upcoming feature film titled People Just Do Nothing Big in Japan that was supposed to be released in 2020 but was delayed until 2021.
Welcome to Corrupt FM.
Welcome.
Yeah, Mo Casa, So Casa.
I'm a big fan of the series. I remember watching the first episode when it initially went up on BBC iPlayer and was hooked straight away, though I think the show definitely improved over time as the initial episodes really are quite rough around the edges. It draws obvious inspiration from the mid-2000s BBC documentary series Tower Block Dreams.
I have 2 small children who you are keeping awake late at night with your loud music.
Your music's so loud. Man, I've got kids that need to sleep.
As well as from The Office, the latter being no surprise as the executive producer of the show is none other than Ash Atala, who also produced The Office. Something that I really like about People Just Do Nothing is that it has humble origins. The stars were friends prior to the show airing, with some of them actually being amateur musicians, and in fact they produced a fair amount of Corrupt FM related content prior to the series initially being greenlit by the BBC. These include 5 webisodes of varying length and a pilot episode of the show that was created in 2012 as part of BBC Three's Comedy Feeds, a series that was designed to showcase emerging talent. There's probably some more minor stuff out there that they made too, but I'd say these are the most important pre-series bits.
Now you've got another 2 options. You either dap or nap. I'm tapping.
My original intention with this video was to talk about the webisodes as well as the pilot, but something felt kinda off about trying to take an in-depth look at them. It's hard to talk about something as low budget and amateur as they are and not sound like a bit of a dickhead.
Anyone with a phone case like that, you can tell he's a complete dickhead.
It's like an art critic ripping the shit out of a kid's pasta art they made at nursery. Yeah, you know they're not great, but they were just having a bit of fun and they weren't trying to make high art or anything. So today I'm just going to be going through that BBC Three Comedy Feeds pilot from 2012 and, well, talking about it. For how much recognition this BAFTA award-winning comedy has received over the years, I've never seen anyone ever talk about this early work, and I think that's a shame, because as a fan of the show, it's all pretty interesting, and even if you're not a fan, it may be somewhat insightful to see how a rough concept eventually became a fully fledged TV series if nothing else. You can watch all of People Just Do Nothing on BBC iPlayer at the moment, and the other material is floating around online if you look for it, so feel free to watch them prior to this if you really care. Anyway, let's talk about that 2012 pilot. Unlike a lot of pilots and demos, this People Just Do Nothing pilot has a completely different plot to the first episode of the first series proper, Secret Location, and it's an actual part of the story of the show rather than it just being its own standalone thing. Events from this pilot and from the previously mentioned webisodes are mentioned within the full series, which is both cool as a fan of the series as you can pick up on some references that most people probably wouldn't get, but it also works well with the mockumentary format as you can actually see the characters grow and change as people over a longer period of time. However, even though this is an original story that wasn't reproduced in the TV series, many of the lines and jokes used here actually were reused in the series. Chabuddy's small operation of making knockoff Ralph Lauren t-shirts from the series 2 episode The Babysitter, that was what actually got MC Sniper in his 2-week stint in jail in which he's being released from in the opening of the pilot.
A little operation where he was banging out knocked off Ralph Lauren's t-shirts.
And in fact, when he's talking about his time in jail in the pilot, he refers to it as a 2 stretch as he's reluctant to say it was just 2 weeks, a joke that is then reused in Secret Location, the first episode of the TV series.
2 stretch. What, ain't you seen films? Ain't you seen films? 2 stretch.
You can probably get the idea. Even though the pilot story is mostly original, lots of the jokes reappear later in one way or another. I think that was a good decision to make though, as not many people have seen or will ever see this pilot and it'd be a shame to have some of those good lines and moments go to waste. Plus it meant that we were able to see the heaven photo again, and I mean come on, how could anyone miss their chance to see this masterpiece? A few sentences back I referred to this character here as MC Sniper, and that probably got some people thinking, hang on, isn't he called MC Grinder? Well, not yet he isn't. Alan Mustafa's character only became MC Grinder in the first episode of the TV series, and in all of this earlier stuff he's named Sniper instead.
Sniper there. Sniper.
My MC.
Again, this is something that is referenced in the TV show. In Competition from Series 1, the station holds a competition with the question being, what was MC Grinder's old MC name? But I thought I'd just mention it as undoubtedly some people would assume that I'm simply getting his name wrong. Repeatedly. So the general story here is that Sniper gets released from jail and learns that the station isn't broadcasting because the transmitter is broken. Sniper, Beats, Decoy and Steves don't seem to know what to do, and so they get into contact with Chubuddy G to try and get it fixed. He's busy with some business, but the guys insist that Steves can deal with it for him by driving a lorry full of energy drinks to Bradford. They pay him to fix the transmitter, not with money, but rather with a box of bootleg Ralph Lauren t-shirts that were stored at Sniper and Misha's flat. Once that's fixed, they do Sniper's first radio set back from jail, but during it, Beats accidentally hits a can of lager onto the transmitter and it stops working, but he decides not to tell Sniper, which would just make him angry. Overall, I think it works pretty well. The pilot's funny and pretty memorable, and also does a good job of introducing us to a whole bunch of characters in a way that feels natural. I feel like you get a good sense of who all these people are and what their role is without it being all simply spelled out for you. I'm not surprised this pilot was a success internally and it led to a whole series being commissioned, because it's pretty well done for something whose sole writers and lead cast are a bunch of friends who had little to no experience in TV at this point in time.
Corrupt FM official Jamaican stroke driver.
On that front, I find it somewhat interesting that Steve Stamp is the only person to get a writing credit here, with Alan Mustafa, Hugo Chegwin and Asim Chowdhury, the show's other regular contributors, only receiving additional material credits. I wonder why that happened and why he wrote it mostly by himself, as I don't think that's the case for anything else People Just Do Nothing related, but outside of asking the guys directly, there's not really a way to find out. As you'd expect in a TV show about a pirate radio station, music is a big focus, and that's all good in the pilot too. The soundtrack really sets the scene well, and both the diegetic and non-diegetic music choices are great. People Just Do Nothing's musical roots in British underground music has always been one of my favourite things about it, as, well, most people probably won't know this, but I'm a big fan of 90s and early 2000s British electronic music, everything from metalheads and good-looking records releases to the fledgling UKG scene and its numerous offshoots, and I'm glad these genres are such an integral piece of the People Just Do Nothing puzzle. This pilot doesn't use anything too niche, there's some Sunship for example, but the UKG soundtrack really gives it a unique identity amongst other shows of this ilk, which makes for a great first impression, which is obviously very important for a pilot. Plus the exposure that the series has given these genres has been great and has hopefully sparked a whole new generation of kids who know their LBs from their tough jams. Corrupt FM's Get Out The Way makes an appearance at the end of the pilot, and that's obviously a fan favourite, but Aha's Take On Me and Toto's Africa also get played during one moment, which is somewhat noteworthy. One criticism I have of the pilot's music usage though, is that their attempts to make music sound like it's being played through speakers is not very well done at all. There's moments in which music is playing out of Decoy's car radio and in the background while Misha's shopping, and it sounds like they've just put some tinny filter over the music and made it quiet. They haven't really tried to mix it into the scene, but that's such a minor thing to pick up on, as I doubt anyone really cares.
Oh, like you're a mug and that, do you know what I mean? Like, but I do love her and that, do you know what I mean? Nearly as much as radio.
The casting of two characters is different to what it'd eventually be in the series, but luckily the two roles that are different are two of the least important. Chubuddy's girlfriend Aldonna, who doesn't say a single word, and Misha's daughter Angel, who's probably about 4 years old, both of which I assume to be the only roles not played by one of the original group of friends that created the show, especially not the 4-year-old girl. They're still the same characters though, and their purposes are the same as in the actual show. Aldonna is a Polish woman that's disinterested in everything Chubuddy does, and Angel is Misha and Sniper's daughter, though is heavy-handedly implied to actually be fathered by Decoy. That's perhaps even less subtle in this pilot than in the series, but I think that just makes the joke even funnier. There's some great capturing of facial expressions in the moment where this is brought up, and it just proves exactly why the show really needs to use the mockumentary format. Though she's played by the same actress, Lily Brazier, in both pilots and the series, I find Michelle, Lady Mish, to be a bit different in the way she's portrayed. She's affecting much more of an accent here, or at least a way of speaking, than she is in the series. Lots of saying like, chewing gum, and somewhat slurring her words. It's definitely intentional, and I can't say I dislike it particularly, but I prefer the way she speaks in the series, as it does come across as more genuine there. Something I like about DJ Beats in the pilot is that he seems relatively switched on. If you watch the start of People Just Do Nothing, it's like they made him more stupid for some reason.
You know what I mean? Rolls off the tongue better.
Aerodynamic.
And as the show goes on, he progresses from idiot sidekick to pretty charming family man. I never really understood why they made him be an idiot at the start, as it didn't seem like it really matched up with his character being in a relationship with Roche, so I like that he seems fairly normal in the pilot.
Now get back in!
Steve's is pretty similar to his portrayal in early PJDN. In fact, one thing that I found surprising about this pilot when I watched it initially was just how little he features in it. As I mentioned earlier, Steve Stamp, who plays Steve, was the sole lead writer for this pilot, yet he didn't actually write much for himself to do. Maybe that was intentional and he felt like he wanted to appear less, I'm not sure. He isn't really involved in the main story in this pilot. He agrees to drive the energy drinks to Bradford for Chubuddy, and that's all he does really, barring flailing his arms around dancing over the credits, which I don't think fits in very well. Plus we don't actually see anything more than him starting the van and driving a few meters, so he really doesn't have much screen time. In this pilot and early People Just Do Nothing in general, they treat Steve's as pretty much solely a wacky comic relief character, which I find a bit strange because they've also got Chubuddy for that, but he's also got a lot more else going for him too. Later down the line, Steve's becomes a much more fleshed out character and he gets used more, and I think it all works out well. Here, yeah, his stuff is probably my least favourite aspect of the pilot. I'm not saying his bits are bad necessarily, but just pretty forgettable. Grinder is Grinder, or rather, Sniper is Sniper. He's loud, aggressive, confident, and has a big ego, but that's what makes him him. The fact that he acts pretty much identically in this pilot to all the way through the series is actually pretty good characterization. His whole thing later in the show is that he's stuck in the same mindset and position that he has been for years and he won't change his ways. And the fact that this concept has stuck around ever since their early work shows how well it's been done.
These days, with parenting, less is more, so...
Being a pilot that was produced by some experienced people, including Asher Tala, who also produced The Office as I said in the start of the video, it obviously had a decent budget, some skilled crew and so on, and thus it feels like a pretty professional job overall. It's not a situation like with The Office's original demo of the CD Boss, where the thing is just shot on a camera by the director in a day. This does look and feel like a proper TV show. There's a moment in it which it looks like the wind blows the camera or something at one point, which I find to be a pretty weird thing to leave in. However, as I said in the video I made about that CD Boss Office demo, I think small imperfections like this can be a nice thing to leave in mockumentaries. It makes them feel more real and in the moment, as it's like the documentary crew just had to deal with whatever they managed to shoot. Obviously this is not a real documentary, and they could have easily shot another take in which Beat says this bit and the camera doesn't jerk around, but I think it says a lot about how complete this feels as a project when that's the kind of detail that I'm talking about. It definitely doesn't feel amateurish.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm strong, and I'm handsome. I mean, I've got all the attributes.
I think the talking heads, or the interviews, or whatever you want to call them, are one of my favourite parts of the pilot. There's some really great lines in them, and I think they do a really good job of establishing the characters that get them, especially Beats, who's my favourite character here.
Like, do I have dreams? Dreams can come true. Give me the mic and let me check one too. Nah, jokes.
I think one of the reasons I like them is that they're used in a way that suits the tone of the rest of the pilot. They're not trying to be like how these bits are used in The Office, where they're frequently heavily emotion driven and develop the story a lot, but rather they're just fun moments that sometimes provide a little bit of exposition and are just a great means of getting some funny lines out there that may not have arisen naturally. Something else I find pretty interesting is that, in some ways, this pilot is actually better put together than the first series of the show. If you watch early People Just Do Nothing, it's pretty hard to not notice that the editing is fairly sloppy at points.
Back off.
And there's a considerable amount of ADR'd audio that's not done particularly well.
Yeah, I'm doing work stuff.
Now there's a few errors in this pilot too, like this bit where you can see Steve's mouth moving when he's actually not talking because Sniper's saying something to him.
Of course, say it. Have a couple, of course, say it. Have a couple.
But there isn't much of this sort of thing, and the audio is pretty good overall. I'd say this is actually a really good pilot, and I find it enjoyable even on rewatches. It'd be a great jumping on point for those that have yet to see any of People Just Do Nothing, and also a fun watch for those that are already familiar with the series, as you get to see a slightly earlier take on the show. It does a good job at making you want to watch more, while also not leaving you feeling like they were holding anything back.
I'm not saying you're into that, I'm not saying I'm into that, but we're grown men having a chat, so let's talk.
This show definitely isn't for everyone, as the premise is certainly more niche than other comparable shows, and I imagine some people may be turned off by things like the slang and the music, but if you do like the sound of it, I'd certainly recommend both this pilot and People Just Do Nothing as a whole, as there's some really good stuff in them.